Welcome to the newest episode of the Process of Fat Loss podcast, where our goal is to help you understand the best way to lose fat and live a healthier life. Join us as we discuss some of the toughest and most valuable topics in health and fitness. Today, we're going to be talking about plants and how they don't actually want you to eat them. So we'll discuss how they influence our diet and then if we should actually be eating them. And to start us off, Trevor is going to break down a little bit different parts of plants and then talk about what parts we should consume and what parts we shouldn't be consuming. So Trevor, I'll let you take that away.
All right, thanks, Nick. So I think one of the most powerful ways I've been explaining why plants don't want to be eaten is to show people a picture of a plant and walk them through how nature designed it to protect the plant. So if you're listening to the podcast, just imagine there's a plant in front of you. For everybody else, I'm going to go ahead and share a picture of a plant. So I'm going to pop it up. All right, so if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you actually go to our blog, you'll see a picture of the plant up on there. So we're going to walk through this as nature's design. So when you think of all animals and plants, we have to take into account how they protect themselves from predators. Each thing in nature has a way to protect itself because the number one goal of it is to survive. Animals' way of protecting themselves are two things: to run away or fight back. This is why they have legs for running and hooves, teeth, claws, etc. to fight back with. But plants really don't have these weapons to protect themselves. So instead, they've been designed in a very specific and intelligent way to protect as well as repopulate. Their weapon of choice is chemical warfare. I'll walk you through each part of the plant and explain the goal of survival. So when you think about that, the chemical warfare idea, that's what toxins are, right? Toxins are chemical warfare. So that's what I mean when I say that.
All right, so now let's get into the breakdown of plants. Where are we going to start when we're looking at this plant?
So I like to start from the bottom up. So we're going to start on the roots and work our way to the fruit at the end. So roots are the anchor of the plant. They are how the plant gets its nutrients. It creates stability and makes its home, right? So when you think about the plant itself, it's like rooting itself down in. This is like its most important part, that I need to stay put in this area. So it wants to do everything in its power not to be dug up. So when an animal starts to nibble on the roots, it will release a certain toxin, such as choline, which can cause IBS or autoimmune issues, or polyphenols, which can lead to thyroid, tumor, and kidney issues. These are the root's way of telling the animal to stop eating me. It doesn't always affect the animal immediately, but they can get a poisoning feeling and get very sick from that point on. So if you think about the root, that's why the root has very specific things that it does that makes it so it can't be eaten. And every single part of the body is this way. So again, we're thinking about the plant. This is, it depends on if you believe in God or whatever you believe in how the world was created. But for us, we look at it from the perspective like God created things very intelligently. And so when he did, he made sure that these things can stay around for a long period. And he gave every organism on Earth a chance to have a fight back and make sure that it can do its purpose. And its purpose is very specific. So then the stem. So we think of stems, we think of fiber usually. So like if you're thinking celery, you're thinking broccoli and stuff, you think of that stuff as fiber. That's usually what people think about when they think of the stem part. In the last 30 years, we've been told fiber is the bee's knees, right? And there definitely is some positive, but there are a lot of negatives that outweigh the positive. So forever they've been telling us that like fiber drinks, fiber everything. Fiber has a small goal that it can be used for, but realistically the reason we're using fiber is because our diet is crappy, and so we're going to kind of talk about what that is. So there's a reason you eat a lot of fiber. There is a reason when you eat a lot of fiber you'll get a really upset intestine area. It's a plant's way of making it impossible to break down, so the next time you eat it you won't want to eat it. The fiber component itself is the way that plant teaches animals, do not eat me anymore. However, us as intelligent humans, we think that's a good thing. So you see animals, they don't overeat plants usually, unless they're an herbivore and their body's designed to digest that plant. But you see carnivores, if they have to eat a plant, like you see dogs eating grass or something like that, they don't eat a ton of it. What they do though, they eat enough to make sure that they cause the process they need, but they don't overeat it, so their intestine gets really blocked up. Whereas like humans, we overeat vegetables, and next thing you know, we have these horrible pains in some cases. So as humans, we think it makes us poop more. But the colon itself is actually a smooth muscle. It naturally contracts spontaneously and doesn't need fiber to shove itself in there and to make bigger stools, right? So our everybody thinks like you need fiber to push down, just keep shoving down the thing. We really don't need fiber to do that. The smooth muscle, which means that it contracts on its own, in the colon does the work itself. So it doesn't need our help to force it through. All it does when we do that, we clog it up and we make it hard and harder for that stool to actually be pushed through. Big stool means your body isn't digesting food, which is not a good thing. When you go on a good quality diet, you might not poop. I mean, you'll poop once a day, a quality poop, but you're not pooping 3 times a day, and you're not going days without pooping usually. So that really does make a big difference if you're eating a smart diet. The plant itself is trying to protect its body. It needs the body to get nutrients from the leaves and really through photosynthesis. So not all things in the stem category are not edible though. So like tubers such as potatoes and carrots, they're really more like a stem fruit. Different parts of vegetables can be a fruit in a sense. So potatoes and carrots are actually something that it doesn't really affect the plant if that part's eaten because it can regrow itself other ways. So it puts these things out there that can easily be eaten by animals if need to be. Then you have a small part. Not all the parts of the tubers should be eaten, but mainly the belly of it is pretty low toxin. So like when you look at a carrot, so carrot has all these little, like most people think of the carrot in the grocery store, but that's after the fact, right? When you take carrot in nature and you pull it out, there's a lot of little things coming off the carrot. You don't want to eat all the little things. You want to eat the belly of the carrot, right? So that's the part you clean off all that stuff and eat the belly of the carrot. You don't eat the top part, which is when carrots come out of the ground, if people don't realize, they have a huge stem on top of them and they have leaves on top of them. We're not eating that part. So that's where we kind of look at that component. So then we go up to the leaves. As we get higher on the plant, the toxin levels can be a little lower, meaning like the farther bottom on the plant you are, the more toxic the plant is. As we get towards the top, we end up with a little bit less toxic feelings as a human and from how it affects us. So when it comes to leaves, the plant normally puts out a toxic release on the spot, meaning when you taste kale and it's bitter, that's the plant's way of saying, do not eat me. Unfortunately, we really don't pay attention to that. Animals do. Animals instantly would realize that they can't have this plant because the bitterness means that it's bad for their health. But we see it as bitterness. Oh my God, that must be good for me because it tastes like crap. And then it may not taste like crap to everybody, but like the idea is like, it doesn't taste the best. And so we think, oh, that's probably healthy for us because it doesn't taste so good. But there are many things in leaves that are toxic, such as oxalates, glucosinolates, and tons more things. These normally are toxic in small amounts. These are normally not toxic in small amounts, but it's the volume of them that adds up. So like usually we don't eat just like one spinach leaf. We eat a big bowl of spinach. That's where the issue comes in. So when it comes down to leaves, it's usually not one little thing that's going to really cause damage to you. It's eating a ton of it consistently over a long period of time. So again, this is the saying, don't eat me because I needed to be eaten to keep alive. The animals, like the plants try to say, don't eat me, because I need to keep alive. These plants are doing photosynthesis, capturing water and CO2 with that and trying to prosper. So it's trying to hold on to that component of its body because it's the way it helps continue to grow itself.
All right, so now that we've covered the structure and the main parts of the plant, let's go into some things that grow off of the plants.
Yeah, okay, so there's other components. So we have flower, fruits, and seeds are the next kind of category of stuff. So first of all, I'll be honest, I didn't really think that people eat the flower. I've never really paid attention to eating the flower itself. But people do. When I kind of Googled it to see if people actually eat the flower of a plant, and a lot of people do use them in salads and stuff of that nature. So flowers are nature's way of spreading itself through pollination. It wants to protect itself because it needs to pollinate with other flowers to grow new offspring. I think it goes without saying there are toxins in flowers. That's why most flowers are toxic to eat. Most people don't eat flowers. So we have to be a little careful with putting that kind of stuff in our diet when it's something that we naturally aren't supposed to be having in our diet. All these things we're putting in our body from plants are leading to things like autoimmune disease, leaky gut syndrome, and rapid free radicals in the system. And that's what we got to remember is in the initial moment that we put it in, we don't notice the things are going wrong. It's not like we're having an allergic reaction to it when we, it's not, doesn't have something like peanuts do, right? Where they have anaphylactic toxins, where instantly we're going to break out or get really sick. Most things are this long-term kill that they come along with. We get that autoimmune disease, which affects every aspect of our life, but it didn't come on one night. It came over 10 years of eating beans. So the next category is actually the one category we actually can eat, which is called the fruit. So that's the fruit itself is the part the plant wants us to eat. That's why it makes it sweet and juicy. The plant knows we can regrow more fruit. It can regrow more fruit, so it creates this and stops the animal from destroying the rest of the plant. So if the animal has a fruit to go after, it has no reason to go after the other parts of the plant because it can protect the plant itself protects itself with that juicy, sweet fruit, but the animal itself gets what it wants. It wants that nice, sweet fruit to move on. It's nature's gift to the animals while at the same time protecting its long-term gain for survival. Yes, it has sugar, but natural fructose has very little increase in blood glucose and insulin release, which we've talked about in other podcasts. We'll talk about more. Is when it comes to fat loss, blood glucose and insulin are the main things we're really worried about, besides calorie deficits. So contrary to what so-called experts say, it's actually extremely good for you to have fruit, and they're one of the few parts of the plant that the plant actually wants you to consume. And the last component, which might actually be the most controversial for a lot of people based on their eating habits, are seeds. So when we're talking about seeds, we're talking about legumes, nuts, wheat, rice, corn, and all kernel-based seeds. So it's a pretty big category in this here. So the goal of a seed is to replant itself somewhere else. This way the plant can spread itself and have a better chance for long-term survival. That's why most fruits have seeds in them. They want the animal to eat the seed, then poop it out. So why is this bad for humans then? Isn't this nature's plan? Yeah, it is nature's plan, right? So it's the idea that nature wants you to actually eat this thing and wants you to poop it out and spread it somewhere else. However, the issue that comes in is we don't eat the amount of seeds that nature intended, right? So if you, in an apple has like maybe 4 or 5 seeds in it, but we're sitting there eating tons of seeds, right? When we're eating a handful of nuts, we're eating way more than nature intended. So the seed, this is what happens with the seed itself. The seed then goes through a process of making sure it's not broken down as it goes into the system and absorbed. So as it goes through the digestive system, it pulls all the nutrients from the lining to help protect itself. This is why they call it anti-nutrients, and they're laced with tons of toxins like lectins, phytic acid, isoflavones, and more. The seed is doing everything in its power to make sure that it stays intact. That's why you will find kernels in kernels of corn, or like if you had popcorn and had accidentally ate a seed, you'll find kernels of that in your stools because it forces itself through. It makes sure that it can hold together throughout the whole process. Again, this would be no big deal if you're only eating 5 to 10 seeds at a time, right? Maybe a couple times a week you're eating this. We wouldn't end up with really any issues. Your body could protect itself. The issue is the handfuls. It's when we eat them in many different ways. So we have handfuls of seeds and nuts that we're eating. We're also eating them in butters, oils, and other processed ways. So if you think about seed oils, nut butters, things of that nature, we're getting rid of some of the process that nature had created to protect itself. So one of them would be fiber, right? So seeds have fiber in them. They use fiber to help push that food through the system. The only issue is, in an oil or butter, we've gotten rid of the fiber component. So realistically, it's now no longer doing its process to move itself through. So now it's creating tons of free radicals in body throughout the body. Nuts are also shelled, so that you can't eat a ton of them at a time, right? It takes an animal time to break this nut apart, this seed apart, to get to the inside. So you're not going to eat a ton of them at once. And there's a lot of work that goes through them. The other negative in today's society is most of those things are de-shelled for us. So we can get a ton of them at a time, as well as those oils become rancid over time, which isn't healthy either. Because when they come, let's say you pick a walnut from Brazil, or I don't know where walnuts come from, but somewhere overseas, right? You get a walnut and it's been shelled already for you. By the time you get it, that thing's probably 2 to 3 months old. That oil inside of that has actually been rancid. It goes rancid relatively quickly within a week after of shelling. It's probably even less than that. So if you're eating that walnut at the location that you got it from, no big deal, right? But it's realistically that rancidity happens over time, so we gotta be careful. So there's just so many reasons to eliminate processed nut and seed oils and butters right away because they're extremely toxic. I would want somebody to eliminate the butters and the processed oils before they even worry about getting rid of the actual seed itself. So if there's one thing you can take away from that part is make sure we're getting rid of that component more than you're worried about getting rid of the full seed at once.
All right. So it's kind of a lot of information to digest. As you can probably tell, there's a lot of factors involved in understanding what parts of a plant we should and shouldn't be eating. But some overall concepts are a little bit easier to understand and some takeaways. So what are some takeaways and action steps that we can take away from what you just explained and then have our listeners apply to their lives right away?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Eat the fruit of the plant. Avoid eating seeds. Leaves really depend on how much you're eating, so be cautious of just how much. If you are going to have some leaves, just make sure you're cautious of how much of what you're eating. Some roots are edible, but most stems are not. fermenting most vegetables does actually help break down the toxic levels. So if you have fermented vegetables or you ferment things, that's a pretty good way to do it.
All right, and then if people want to learn a little more about plants being toxic, where would you suggest they look to find a little more information on that?
We'll have them in the show notes and on our blog for sure. But there'll be a couple of my favorites would be Dr. Paul Saladino. He has a great video and podcast that we'll link in there that really talks about how toxic plants are. And then another one that's good is certified nutritional therapist Judy Cho. She has a good book called The Carnivore Cure, I believe it is. But she has a whole thing talking about the anti-nutrients in plants. So we'll attach the article as well in this.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed the discussion on today's topic. Remember, the best time to start living healthier is today, so make sure to take action in your life right away. If you enjoyed listening to today's episode, please give us a review, subscribe, and follow us on social media to stay up to date on upcoming episodes and topics. If you have any ideas or topics you'd like us to talk about in the future, just send us an email or message us on social media, and we might talk about those topics in the future. Like Trevor said, all of the links that we talked about and the references will be in the show notes and on our blog on our website. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you enjoy it. You will join us for the next episode of The Process of Fat Loss.
All right, thanks, guys.